At a New Age lodge, people keep transitioning to the astral plane in the most violent way possible. Can Barnaby align his third eye and solve the case? We're talking the metaphysical.
The murderous.
And moms on cocaine on this episode of
Welcome to Midsomer.
Hello and welcome to Midsomer, the podcast where we dissect all the mysteries, the murders, and the many weird things about the long-running hit TV show Midsomer Murders. I'm your host, Eric Buscher, and with me as always is my co-host, Eileen Becker.
Hello, Eric. Today we are talking about Death in Disguise, the fourth episode of the first series. It originally aired May 6th, 1998. It was directed by Baz Taylor and written by Douglas Watkinson. Let's start chanting.
Spoiler warning, we will be discussing the events of this episode, including the identity of the murderer. So if you haven't watched it yet and don't want to know who done it, pause this and go watch it. We will still be here when you get back.
Inspector, I know you think the master was probably murdered, but you are going about this in quite the wrong way.
And how would you describe his present situation?
Well, it's obvious. He's been astrally harvested.
And how do you explain a carving knife stuck in his chest?
A celestial lance.
With Made in Sheffield stamped on it?
It's morning at the lodge of the Golden Windhorse, a New Age commune / cult in Midsomer. Out the front door steps a high elf of Rivendell. Oh wait, that's actually the master of the lodge, Ian Craigie. He started the lodge 10 years ago with Bill Carter as a scam with the promise that they would cash out after a decade. Bill is ready to cash out, but Ian has come to believe in their mission of helping fellow travelers. Bill isn't happy that Ian won't buy him out, and they begin to argue, heading inside the lodge where the members are getting breakfast ready. The members hear them fighting at the top of the stairs, then a scream, and a bang, and Bill is dead at the bottom of the stairs. Lodge member May Cuddle drags Tom Barnaby away from gutting a fish to investigate. Troy and Bullock let him know Carter died from a broken neck, and they can smell whiskey on him. The other members of the lodge include Third Eye using Ken and Heather Beavers, former legal clerk Arno Gibbs, secretive Trixie Channing, and the young and beautiful Suhami, as well as the teenage mute Tim. They all claim to have seen nothing. When the detectives leave, young, handsome Christopher Wainwright arrives at the lodge. He quickly grows close to Suhami. A few days later, a big storm hits the lodge and Tim disappears. The members fan out to find him, with Ian, Chris, and May going outside. A cannonball falls from the roof, almost killing May. Chris runs to the roof to see what happened, and the next day tells Suhami that he found a tire iron and that the ball was clearly meant for him. Meanwhile, the Beavers are snitching to local reporter Ava Rokeby about what's going on and saying Bill was murdered. Now at this point, we meet Guy and Felicity Gamelin, the horrible parents of Suhami who hate each other. Guy is an ultra-rich corporate monster, and Felicity is a cocaine mom. They plan to go make their daughter miserable on her 18th birthday. She freaks out when they arrive at the lodge, and at her birthday nutloaf dinner, Guy hands her an envelope with £3 million, her inheritance. She immediately hands it to Ian, which pisses off Guy. Now for the birthday celebration, May is going to have a past life regression into the life of Gaius, a food taster for the Roman emperor. As she flashes back to ancient Rome... Wait, we're flashing back to ancient Rome? What the hell? Gaius eats a poisonous mushroom. This causes May to collapse and everyone rushes to help her. The lights go out and when they come back, Ian is found stabbed in the chest and dying, pointing an accusing hand towards Guy. Tourist info. This week, our only main location is really the Lodge of the Golden Windhorse, which I guess is in Coston? They don't really make it clear. The lodge is the home of the finest acorn coffee in all of Midsomer. Come for the regressions, stay for the nutloaf.
I think I'll pass on both.
So, this is like first season Midsomer. This is based on the novel. This is the season where all the episodes are based on the actual novels.
Mm-hmm.
This is actually the third novel in the series. They put the episodes out of order for no real reason. I don't think the books are anywhere near or any kind of chronological progression.
The first season episodes do feel more novelistic, less TV showish.
I think you mean slow.
There is a very big difference between what you do in a written narrative versus what you would do with a visual narrative. they are very different.
You know there's writers for this, right?
Yes, I know, but still,
there's a whole thing writer's strike right now.
Yeah, and yeah, let's go writers. But for a movie and a TV show, when you're doing something, when you're writing for that, it has to be more visual. And this, you're not seeing it quite as visual as you do in later seasons, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I also feel like, TV that was made 25 years ago has a different pacing than TV that's made now. They had slightly, like, in the US, TV episodes have gotten shorter over the decades as they've tried to cram in more ads. Something that was like 47 minutes that might have been in 1980 is now 40 minutes. So,
yeah.
But this still felt slow. Now, part of that is they try to give every character a little bit of a arc, a little bit of a moment.
Mm-hmm.
Every character in this episode has a subtle character change by the end of it, which you don't really see in modern episodes, which I think is also a detriment. I think maybe because it was all in one location, it felt static.
Yeah, other than the police station and the Barnaby home, everything takes place at the lodge.
Yeah, it's very lodge centric, so we never really get out of we get out of there in moments. Like we see the Gamelins in their home life. There's that one scene where Troy and go visits the woman at her cottage. But yeah, I think that part of it was I really enjoyed this episode, but I think it is a little slow, and I think part of it is that we are stuck at the lodge. And I think that because, let's just talk about the lodge with their weird New Age rituals and all that stuff. But I feel like because the choice at the top is that we learn that this was started as a scam, which means that everything we see after it, every New Age ritual, everything of that sort, we know is meant to be goofy. And we shouldn't, as an audience, should not take that seriously at all. No matter how serious they take it, we know, wow, they're fools.
Yeah, though I agree that I think it would have worked better if we had not known it was a scam until maybe after even Ian Craigie had been murdered. But you do, because I think it's just a strong performance, that you do get that he has come to believe in what he is doing there.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the thing, is like he has clearly swallowed the Kool-Aid. And what I find interesting is he swallowed the Kool-Aid in the most beneficial way possible. Like, he seems a very benign cult leader, if you would call it that. Like, that there's that moment when Suhami hands him the check, and he even tells guys, like, I haven't decided if I'm taking this.
Yeah.
He seems very sedate and serene, and it's very nice, but it's also just sort of, again, because we know a scam at the top, that all these things that they're doing, these ceremonies and rituals, like that funeral service that's like just straight out of a weird Wicker Man movie, and the regression ceremony, like the rituals, we know all of them are just kind of made up, and that they were made up as a scam. So they have no, I guess it's like, we know that they believe in them, but because we know that they were made up as con artists, I just feel it's a little, oh, well, we're just kind of laughing at them, as opposed to being kind of invested in that world of like, oh, well, maybe they are in touch with something in these rituals. Maybe this regression is a real thing, and we do need to talk about this regression.
Yeah, and just before we get into the regression, I think if you compare it to, for instance, as in the Electric Vendetta, where Tom Barnaby does not believe in that the aliens created the crop circles, but the character Floyd very much does. Since we know at the beginning that Ian was a con man from the start, it does color everything a bit negatively.
And don't forget that Floyd in Electric Vendetta also falsified stuff for the benefit of his cause. Like, he dumped bodies in those circles to bring more notice to them, to try to bring more believers, which we find out later, and that does sort of negate a little bit about it. But yeah, I let's talk about this regression ceremony. Why do you think there was a flashback?
I guess it's really weird because obviously she's talking in English in through the voice of a Gaius Quintus, who was a Roman, and she says he's in 79 AD, which is about 100 years before 50 years before Hadrian's Wall was constructed. So, and AD wasn't even a thing at that time. So Gaius Quintus is obviously a very modern Roman.
It's delusional.
Yeah.
There's the delusion of what she's saying, but then they choose to visually show it to us. They visually take us back to whatever this is that she is. This is an audio medium, but audience, I am doing air quotes, which she is like regressing into this past life. And it reminds me a bit of the dream sequence that we see in the very first Midsomer episode that we never really saw again. This weird little film choice. They did a few of these in the first season, and they were like, those don't work.
Yeah. And what I thought was funny is that the actress is playing Gaius Quintus, so it's obviously, her body as Gaius Quintus, food taster, and it just makes it very funny.
What do you think Gaius would have made of Nutloaf?
He said, I'm not serving this to my emperor or general or whoever he's food tasting for.
I think it would have been really funny if Barnaby either drank some acorn coffee or ate some Nutloaf and would have just said, it's still better than what Joyce makes.
Yeah. This was definitely in the Joyce is a terrible cook part of the...
Yeah. I did like all the little, like the eye necklace thing that just kept recurring.
Yeah.
Or not eye necklace. I guess what were those things? Because they put them, they're not quite tiaras or anything, but they were over their head with their third eye.
Yeah, they were third eye things. They're kind of derisively called head necklaces by a lot of people who study historical faction, because they aren't really historical. They're kind of, but they are kind of a third eye channeling thing.
Yeah. It was just funny. They just, like, those beavers were just really just all in on those head necklaces.
I found them to be delightfully wacky.
Everybody at the lodge was kind of wacky in their own way. I kind of love that Trixie character I'm not quite sure why she's there. Like, she doesn't seem to be swallowing the Kool-Aid as much as everyone else. Like, that whole ride home with that car ride with the bees where they break down and she tells Mrs. Beavers that the best way to keep bees calm is to sing them a lullaby. And she starts singing them and you just see Trixie's face like, oh my God, she's dumb.
Well, Trixie was there as basically she was hiding out from the crazy soon-to-be ex-wife.
Yeah.
And I guess it was like a safe place for her. And she knew that it was going to be safe. And she was respectful of it, but still wasn't buying into it completely.
Yeah.
But I love that her thing with the bees. And I'm hoping that somebody told the bees that Ian died.
But not Guy?
Well, I don't think they cared that Guy died. Or that Bill died. I think they would have cared that Ian died.
Well, that's so... They would have known Bill. That's terrible. How dare you? Bees have wide open hearts, Eileen.
They do have wide open hearts. They may have two hearts. Who knows? I don't know much about bee anatomy.
Tell you what, you can, rather than Eileen's History Corner, when we get to that episode about the bees, you can do Eileen's Science Corner and all about bees.
How many hearts do they have?
There was one recurring bit in this episode that I thought was hysterical, was when the cannonball falls off, and then they choose as a group to roll the cannonball into the car, drive to Coston PD, roll the cannonball out of the car onto Barnaby's desk, where it sits for a large chunk of this episode.
I loved the visual of that. It made absolutely no sense. First of all, you've broken completely any use of it as evidence, because it is no longer in situ as far as a crime scene. Also, she runs to get Tom at his house, but there's a phone at the lodge. We see that with her third one when she calls him.
Judging from Tom's reaction when she shows up at the door, I'm guessing there's a caller ID and, they're not picking up for May Cuddle. I will say is that Barnaby has some interesting atypical reactions we don't see in him a lot after this season. The hiding of May Cuddle, and the sort of backing off when, he thinks something is weird with Bill Carter's death, but it's very clear that between when he's at the lodge and then when they drop off the cannonball, there's some time has passed. I'm pretty sure they say it's been a few days.
Mm-hmm.
And, the Barnaby in later seasons wouldn't let go. Like, he would continue on. But this Barnaby's like, I got no evidence, and, there's other triple homicides piling up.
Something was going on in Badger's Drift. We just know it.
Yeah. We see how Barnaby is different. Like, Barnaby is a little different in this episode, I felt. And he is less patient, less tolerant.
Yeah. He's much shorter with the witnesses. And it's something that is very different from where he ends up, especially with Tim. I think a later Tom Barnaby would have been much more patient with Tim.
Well, yeah, there's that point, like, when the master's crying, and he's like, can we get this kid to shut up, basically, is what he's saying. It's like, Tim is wailing in grief, and he's like, can we get him to shut up?
Yeah. I think he finally comes around when he does approach Tim in the tree. But even then, he's still not completely convinced that Tim is innocent.
Yeah. Since so much of this is spent in the lodge, all this episode is spent in the lodge, and it's dealing with New Age practices and beliefs, Eileen's going to take us the history of New Age in Eileen's History Corner.
All right. It is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. A new age of peace and love will spring forth when the moon is in the 7th house and Jupiter aligns with Mars. Now, while most sources trace the origin of the New Age movement to the 1970s in the wake of the hippies, the influences can be traced back much further. After the Industrial Revolution and the Age of Enlightenment, the Romantic era took hold in Europe and the Americas. While the Enlightenment had centered on reason and natural law, Romanticism embraced emotion and individualism. Paganism and the glorification of the Middle Ages were important elements. While it had significant effects on the arts, philosophy, and politics, it also had an impact on various religions, with many embracing a more fundamental outlook while others embraced neo-paganism, spiritualism, nature, and syncretism, which combines elements from many faiths into new belief systems. Transcendentalism is a philosophy that developed in the U.S. in the 1820s and 1830s. It believed in the inherent goodness of people and nature, but that they had been corrupted. Transcendentalists emphasize self-reliance and independence, as illustrated in Henry David Thoreau's book Walden and in the essays of Ralph Waldo Emerson. In the 1840s, the New Thought movement arose in the U.S. based on the teachings of Phineas Quimby. He drew inspiration from ancient religions from all over the world, from ancient Greece and Egypt to India and China. Quimby was also influenced by the work of German physician Franz Mesmer, who theorized about a natural energy that connected both animate and inanimate objects. The New Thought movement believed that God is everywhere, divine thought is a force for good, and sickness originates in the mind and can be cured with right thinking. Mary Baker Eddy, the founder of Christian Science, studied with Quimby. In the 1870s, the Theosophy religion was founded by Russian Helena Blavatsky, and it taught that there was an ancient secret brotherhood of masters centered in Tibet, and that these wise men held ancient knowledge and supernatural powers. It incorporated elements of many religions, including the idea of reincarnation. Spiritualism and communicating with the dead also became very popular. Pre-Christian Germanic paganism also saw a revival, focusing on the pantheon of gods including Odin, Freya, and Chris Hemsworth. Many indigenous religions also saw revivals after being suppressed. New religions were springing up like weeds. In the early 20th century, Aleister Crowley founded the religion Thelema, drawing on ancient Greek and Egyptian religions as well as medieval European esoteric practices. He declared himself the prophet who would usher in the Aeon of Horus. Other sects kept cropping up, espousing ritual magic, the occult, energy medicine, and, in the 1950s, UFOs. The 1930s saw the rise of Edgar Cayce's Association for Research and Enlightenment. Casey was a clairvoyant and proponent of holistic health who died in 1945. Wicca, the modern practice of witchcraft, also grew steadily in the mid-20th century. Practitioners of Eastern religions began to travel more and more to Europe and the U.S., influencing the new sects that rose up and helping to inspire the Beat Generation. Jack Kerouac's The Dharma Bums was published in 1958, and poet Allen Ginsberg made a spiritual pilgrimage to India in 1963. Transcendental meditation, a form of mantra meditation, was developed by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi in the 1950s and became a worldwide phenomenon taken up by the Beatles and the Beach Boys. The meditation technique is not attached to any specific belief system, so its adherents can range from devout to atheistic, and as with yoga, many practice for the physical and mental health benefits. The 1950s also saw the rise of the Unification Church, popularly known as the Moonies, Scientology, and Jim Jones's infamous People's Temple, all of which drew from various religions and cults. The 1960s saw the rise of the counterculture movement and the hippies, and experimentation and alternative lifestyles were encouraged. The effect on culture and the arts was immense, and communes and collectives sprung up, such as the Findhorn Trust in Scotland, which was established in 1962. David Spangler, a seminal figure in the New Age movement, visited there in 1970. The emphasis on experimentation not only led to the rise in popularity of transcendental meditation, but also yoga, spiritual consciousness, and the repudiation of traditional Western religion. Many saw Buddhism and Hinduism as less rule-bound spiritual practices, while others embraced neo-paganism or the occult. The Hare Krishnas group was founded in 1966. By the early 1970s, the term New Age had moved from referencing a coming age of peace and love to describing a variety of spiritual practices, incorporating aspects of Christianity, Eastern religions and philosophies, indigenous religions and ancient mythologies, the occult, environmentalism, Western esotericism, astrology, ufology, shamanism, Kabbalah, holistic health and alternative medicine, reincarnation, near-death experiences, lucid dreaming, automatic writing, clairvoyance, alchemy, numerology, tarot, and past lives. New Age shops were everywhere, selling crystals and books on crystals. Werner Erhard established EST courses in 1971, and A Course in Miracles was published in 1975. The books of Carlos Castaneda, inspired by Yaqui shamanism, became hugely popular and influential. Linda Goodman's books on astrology, sun signs, and love signs became bestsellers. Ram Dass's hugely popular Be Here Now introduced Eastern philosophy and yoga to a wide audience. The New Age movement reached its zenith in the 1980s when Shirley MacLaine's Out on a Limb and Louise Hay's You Can Heal Your Life became huge bestsellers, and Edgar Cayce's prophetic book saw a big revival. While the term New Age started falling out of favor in the late 1980s, the 1990s still saw some major publications such as Iron John, a book about men, The Celestine Prophecy, and Conversations with God, as well as the rise of authors such as Deepak Chopra and Marianne Williamson. Mind, body, and spirit became the new mantra. Wellness was a rebranding. There's also been a dark side to the New Age culture, beyond the charlatans often attracted to new movements. It can morph into dangerous cults, such as Heaven's Gate, whose members committed mass suicide in 1997, or develop into conspirituality, such as with the QAnon's conspiracy theory cult. Followers can believe that they have special knowledge or enlightenment and are thus persecuted for their awareness of the real truth. And politically, adherents can range from the far left to the far right, as well as being apolitical, so they just run the gamut.
How did you not mention Manson?
I had to really edit a lot of this down.
Where?
Trust me. This was like twice as long when I initially wrote it.
For the audience, just for full transparency, Eileen and I both have day jobs working for Penguin Random House, a very large book publisher that does publish or sell or distribute several of the titles that we mentioned today. That this is our mentioning of these titles has nothing to do with our job. These are just important texts in the New Age movement. Just want to be clear with our audience because we respect you. Shall we do some cast highlights?
Yeah, let's do some cast highlights.
All right, let's start with Judy Cornwell. She was the unstoppable May Cuddle. She is quite the history. Now, her grandmother was a well-known music hall singer, and as a child, she attended a convent school with the actress Penelope Keith. Now, Judy's family emigrated to Australia when she was young, but she came back to England as a teen and made a career as a dancer and comedian who would perform in between nude acts at a Leicester Square theatre club. She eventually switched over to being an actress, and she had a lengthy career appearing in Bergerac, Doctor Who, Rumple of the Bailey, EastEnders, Dixon of Dock Green, and The Famous Five. But her most recognizable role will forever be as Daisy, the sister of Hyacinth Bouquet in the classic sitcom Keeping Up Appearances. She also appeared as Anya Claus in 1985's famous turkey, Santa Claus the Movie. She's also a published author with several novels to her credit, as well as her autobiography, Adventures of a Jelly Baby. Michael Feast was our New Age guru, Ian Craigie. Now, he trained at the Central School of Speech and Drama and co-starred in the original London production of Hair, so he is used to hippies. He worked several times with John Gielgud and then actually played Gielgud in a biographical play called Plague Over England. Now, he had a long career with parts in Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon, A Touch of Frost, Casualty, Velvet Goldmine, State of Play, Touching Evil, the Christine Ricci Pignose movie Penelope, and most recently in Vera. Now, he's a Game of Throner who played Aeron Greyjoy in the series, but he's also the smooth operator in the classic music video for the song Smooth Operator by Sade.
I found both of them very delightful in their roles, but for very different reasons. She is so over the top.
Yes.
But he brings a really nice restraint to his role that really makes you believe in Ian, even though you really know he's a con man.
Colin Farrell was Ken Beavers. Not that Colin Farrell. In fact, even though he had a successful career a decade before that Colin Farrell became a leading man, this Colin Farrell tends to get credited nowadays as Col, just to avoid confusion, which I think is a little unfair for a guy who appeared in A Bridge Too Far, Gandhi, The Doctors, The Land That Time Forgot, The Bill, Heartbeat, and EastEnders. His most well-known role is as Ernie Hadfield in the classic series In Loving Memory, and he is married to the actress Anne Penfold. Diane Bull played weird headgear-wearing Heather Beavers. Sadly, this was her last film role. Diane passed away from cancer in 1998. She left behind a rich career appearing in Something in Disguise, The Practice, Shrinks, Sitting Pretty, and The Bill, and she also had a well-regarded theater career that many people commented on in her obituary in The Guardian.
Robert Pickavance was Gravity Challenge William Carter. Based in Leeds, this is only his second credit on IMDb. After this, he appeared in Kavanaugh QC, Foyle's War, Emmerdale Farm, Coronation Street, and most recently, in The Confession and Emily. Daniel Hart played Scaredy Cat Tim Riley. This was also his second credit. After this, he appeared in Vanity Fair, The Man Who Cried, Cambridge Spies, and Love Soup. His last credit was a short film, The Bear, back in 2015. Anna Bolt was the rebellious Sylvie Gemelin, or Suhami. She got her start on screen in a 1992 adaptation of Turn of the Screw, followed by appearances in Casualty and Keeping Up Appearances. Her biggest role was as Dr. Green in the first Resident Evil film, produced by her brother. Nepotism. She's also done The Bill, Doctors, and Holby City. Her last credit is back in 2010. Graham Turner played the beaten husband Raymond Jennings. His first role was in the show Brett way back in 1971. Since then, he appeared in Grange Hill, A Touch of Frost, If Only, The Bill, Doctor Who, and most recently Housebound. Dolly Wells is intrepid reporter Ava Rokeby. This is a real before they were famous appearance. Dolly comes from an acting family. Her father is the comic actor John Wells, and her cousin is Anna Duckface Chancellor from Four Weddings and a Funeral. While trying to find work as an actor, Dolly was a reporter in real life at the Evening Standard. Eventually, her career found her footing, and she got roles in Bridget Jones's Diary, Morgan Caller, The Mighty Boosh, Star Stories, Spy, and Some Girls. She co-wrote and co-starred in Doll and M with her friend and Midsomer alum Emily Mortimer, and then appeared in Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, Straight Talk, and The Outlaws. She's also appeared in 2 Stephen Moffat miniseries in starring roles, his controversial Dracula, and the recent hit Inside Man with David Tennant.
I forgot that she was in this, and seeing her, it's like, the stuff that she's done with Moffat, Like, I haven't seen Doll and M. I've heard good things about it, but her role in Dracula and then in Inside Man, where she's kind of going toe to toe with David Tennant, she's fantastic. And this really is that sort of like, oh, she's got like kind of a nothing role in here.
Yeah.
I forget about all the other stuff that she's done because she's so recent in my brain, but she's had such a long career.
We have several return visitors this episode. Charles Kay played green vest wearing Arno Gibbs. He also appeared in Vixen's Run. Kay originally planned to study medicine, but switched to the stage and graduated from RADA. He went on to work with the Royal Court Theatre and the Royal Shakespeare Company. On screen, he has had a prolific career, appearing in Fall of Eagles, I, Claudius, Bergerac, Amadeus, the Kenneth Branagh Henry V, and Law and Order UK. He is scheduled to appear in an upcoming film called Schadenfreude, featuring another Midsomer actor, Ronald Pickup. Miles Anderson was huge jerk Guy Gamelin. He always plays huge jerks. He's also in last year's Model. Anderson was born in colonial Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe. His father was a major general stationed there who was dismissed because of his opposition to the colonial government's plans for denial of native African rule upon independence. His mother wrote a memoir about her childhood in Rhodesia called The Toe Rags. Apparently, in the middle of a Shakespeare class, he quit school and announced his desire to return to England to study acting. It's paid off for him, graduating from RADA and spending 10 years with the RSC. He's appeared in a number of projects, including Soldier Soldier, House of Cards, Cry Freedom, Ultimate Force, Criminal Minds, La La Land, Baskets, The Tragedy of Macbeth with Denzel Washington, and in the most recent series of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Susan Tracy played Cocaine Mom Felicity Gamelin, and I'm never going to get tired of calling her Cocaine Mom. She's also in the episode King's Crystal. Born in Marylebone, her first screen appearance was as schoolgirl number 2 on Armchair Theatre way back in 1964. She would go on to appear in The Stars Look Down, The Diary of Anne Frank, Lovejoy, Playing the Field, New Tricks, and most recently in Ted Lasso and Manhunt. And I enjoyed her sort of comical, drunk, small, like there's not much to her role other than her drinking, her doing lines of cocaine.
Yeah.
And then her trying to dry out with May Cuddle, which poor Felicity Gamelin, she's gonna need some rehab.
Yeah.
Now, Tilly Blackwood was the very private Trixie Channing. Now, she's in an episode we previously covered, The Axeman Cometh. Now, as we mentioned in that episode, she's also appeared on the series Endeavor, Stella, and AbFab. We've also discovered that she does work as an audition doctor, helping actors prepare for their big auditions. You can find her contact information on her social media page. Mary Healy has the smaller role of Mrs. Cook. She also appeared in the episode Midsummer Life. She's a working British character actress with appearances in Pope Joan, Z-Cars, The Duchess of Duke Street, King and Castle, Chaplin, Doctor Who, Brastoff, and Line of Duty. Our village star this week is Stephen Moyer, who played Chris Wainwright, aka Andrew Carter. Now, most people are gonna recognize him from his starring role in the series True Blood, where he played sexy bloodsucker Bill Compton trying to woo Suki. His wild character swings took him from sexy love interest to toxic boyfriend, and the finale of that show has been called one of the worst of all time, especially by me, because it's terrible. But he met his wife, Anna Paquin, on the show, so it all works out. Moyer studied at the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Arts, LAMDA, and went on to do theater work with the RSC, culminating in a tour of Romeo and Juliet, where he played Romeo, of course. His first TV role was in 1993's Conjugal Rights, and his first film role was in the adaptation of Prince Valiant in 1997, and I'm sure we all remember that one. He would go on to appear in Lord of Misrule, Codifel, The Starter Wife, and Quills before his big break with True Blood. Now, after True Blood ended, he starred in the 2017 Marvel mutant show The Gifted, as well as the last 3 films in the After series, which is sort of a YA love story movie series. He made his film directorial debut in 2018 with The Parting Glass, which is written by and starring his friend from True Blood, Dennis O'Hare. He also helped produce his wife's series, Flack. But no matter what else he does, he will forever be remembered as the man who said this.
Sucky, 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 sucky.
I confess that I have never watched True Blood.
The first 2 seasons are great. The third season's good, and then after that, it's a real short run downhill. Like, the first couple seasons, he is the love interest. Then you find out he has, like, had these ulterior motives, and he becomes this weird, ambivalent bad guy. And in the very last episode, he goes to Suki Stackhouse, the love of his life, and demands that she kill him. Like, I love you so much. Now murder me. Which just, like, isn't that the ultimate toxic boyfriend move?
Yeah, that's kind of icky.
Yeah. But he was very good in this episode. Also, is kind of a toxic boyfriend.
Yeah.
You know, he had a lot of charm. I kind of knew he was going to be the bad guy, just in the sense of, he like, I recognize, like, he goes on to be like this big deal. I bet you he's the murderer.
Yeah, he does bring a lot of charm to it. I remember watching it the first time thinking, well, he's very cute and charming, and he looks vaguely familiar.
Yeah. And this is still 10 years from, True Blood. So,
yeah.
All right, we're going to take a quick break here, and we're going to be back with the second half of Death in Disguise. And we're back. Now let's dig into the second half of Death in Disguise.
Don't think badly of Heather, Inspector. It's not nosiness. It's just her cosmic aerials are so finely tuned.
Oh, all this claptrap. I'm not interested in her cosmic aerials. So can we please have no more chat about astral paths and the Ark of the Gathered Souls? This man has been murdered, and whoever killed him will pay for it.
At the murder scene, Bullock pulls 2 things off Ian. The carving knife within his chest, and the wig on his head. Looks like Ian might have been suffering from cancer. The Lodge members try to put a real positive spin on things by saying Ian was astral harvested with a celestial lance. Troy spends the night there to babysit suspects Tim, who is covered in blood, and Guy, 'cause he's Guy. I mean, even his wife thinks he did it. The next day, Barnaby and Troy try to figure out what happened while drinking coffee made from acorns. There's no prints on the knife, and a gold thread on it seems to have come from a tapestry. The Beavers say they wish they could have been the ones to help send the Master to the next level, which is a real weird way of saying they wish they had murdered someone. Instead, they think it was Guy due to the Master's gesture. They also tell him about the £3 million. But Guy says he couldn't care less about the money. He just doesn't like his daughter being used. The Gamlins are going to hang out at the Lodge for a few days. Guy wants to get to know his daughter's new boyfriend, Chris, and Mom wants to dry out. The detectives also question Chris, but since he arrived after Bill was dead, he says he doesn't really know much about all the people there. Arno says Ian's will originally left everything to Carter, but he wanted to change it a few days before his death. When they find the will, Ian had given the place to May and Arno to carry on the good work. After some careful research, Barnaby learns that Ian and Bill started as small-time con artists, which we knew, and that the Beavers were arrested for running a brothel in Hull.
The Beavers.
Damn it, Eileen. But they gave that life up when they met the Master, also after they were arrested, and found a new purpose. Turns out the Lodge may have started as a scam, but it changed the lives of the people in it, including Ian. While eating an edible meal at home for a change, Barnaby sees news coverage about the wedding of Chris Wainwright, and he's not the gentleman at the Lodge. Turns out our Chris is actually Andrew Carter, Bill's nephew. He's been living in Spain doing odd jobs and working at the circus when Bill asked him to come help get Ian to buy him out. So he pretended to be Chris, but when he arrived, Bill was already dead, and Andrew has been trying to find out who did it ever since. He accuses Tim of both murders. Barnaby talks to Tim, or tries to since Tim hasn't said a word in over a year, but Barnaby manages to get him to tell him how Ian was stabbed. Tim says it was magic, but it's not magic when Guy is found dead with his former mistress Trixie missing. Apparently Guy had a heart attack, but his heart pills are missing as well. They track her down at the home of Raymond Jennings and interrupt them having some afternoon delight. Raymond and Trixie have been having an affair, but now he is divorced and they can be together. Troy notices that all the women in the lodge have the same kind of bag, which has gold thread like the one found on the knife. Later on, while watching people playing darts, Barnaby gets a brainstorm. Barnaby visits Arno, May, and Tim, and we get the first reveal. When Tim saw Bill threatening Ian, he pushed him away, accidentally sending him to his death. Arno, in an attempt to cover up Tim's involvement, poured whiskey on him to make it look like he was drunk. After a quick trip back to the office to call Spain, Barnaby and Troy return to the lodge to find Andrew fighting with Tim on the roof, ultimately sending Tim through the glass ceiling of the solarium. Luckily, Barnaby is quick with a couch and saves Tim's life. Now, Andrew claims Tim was trying to kill him, but Barnaby has the second reveal. Andrew was trying to kill Tim to cover up the fact Andrew killed Ian. Even though he was across the room, he hid the knife in a bag, and then when people were distracted, he threw it across the room and into Ian, having learned knife throwing at the circus. Tim knew he did it, and now that he was speaking, he was at risk. Turns out he knew that Suhami was rich from letters with his uncle and came to woo her. That cannibal was an accident, one that he used to make it look like he was a target. The tire iron he found couldn't have been there because it was being used on a flat tire at the same time. He also let Guy die when Guy started having a heart attack and treated Andrew like he was a servant. Plus, Andrew actually had developed feelings for Suhami and didn't like how Guy treated her. Barnaby arrests Andrew, but lets Tim go, cause favoritism. Let's talk about the killer reveal. I kind of felt it was a little obvious, but like I said, I think that might be just because we know Stephen Moyer is such a bigger actor now.
Yeah, I also have the Agatha Christie, everybody who is charming and handsome and looks like her ex-husband is the murderer kind of thing always in the back of my mind.
Also, the Agatha Christie rule is the person that absolutely couldn't have done it did it.
Yeah.
Somehow it's some convoluted thing that they managed to do it. But I did like the idea that it was knife throwing, even though that carving knife, which, by the way, the strange kill, that knife throw is the strange kill for this episode, but I don't think carving knives are balanced to the way that you could actually throw it with any kind of accuracy to kill somebody.
It's weird. I have done knife throwing at Ren fairs and stuff like that, and the axe throwing and stuff like that, and it's really, really hard, but I guess you can learn to do it. But I think you have to be familiar with the balance. He would have had to have practiced with that knife a lot to get it right into a guy's heart.
I feel like knife throwing is more with daggers than you do that with daggers, which are like more of kind of like an arrow.
Yeah.
And a carving knife would have been a lot harder. But
yeah,
I will also say this: that fight at the end of the roof, it's quite clear he's trying to push Tim over. Like, it's not even subtle in the least.
Yeah, we know what it is because it's obvious who's trying to kill whom.
I mean, he's just straight keeps trying to pick him up and push him over the side.
Yeah.
And his defense is, he was trying to kill me. And I'm like, that, like, you literally had your hands around him trying to push him over the side of the building. That's not.
Yeah. And at one point, Tim runs away and he chases him.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Tim and his magical recovery. So is Tom magic?
Tom is magic.
That was one of those weird, implausible things of just like, it reminded me of that old Simpsons episode where Homer ends up in sort of a mental institution, and and it's that joke of the chief from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and they're like, he's never spoken for years, and then Homer goes, oh hey, and then the chief goes, hiya. Nobody said anything to me. But that's kind of what it was like Tom talks to him for like 30 seconds. It gets him to say a word.
Yeah. Even Ian couldn't get him to say anything. It is like they always talked at him rather than to him.
Yeah. And it was like that sort of like, oh, he's cowering in the wood. He's cowering from the storm. We need to shelter him. It's like, kid's 18. If he's that scared of the storm, he needs some serious help because something highly traumatic has happened to him.
Yeah. And surely they would have found where he goes when he's they knew about the tree, and it would have been stupid to go running around and get in a tree during a thunderstorm. Though, I don't know, maybe in England thunderstorms don't strike trees. They do in the US.
Yep.
But, they would have, it's like he went to a closet, an enclosed space, an interior thing, which is what, my dog would do when a thunderstorm came along. So, yeah.
There was a trinity of love stories kind of in this episode. So you had Andrew and Suhami, who I thought that was like the most interesting choice of sort of the Andrew character was that thing at the end where he's like, I just didn't like how Guy treated Suhami. Like, she's actually a really awesome person. And I was like, Huh. He actually did like her.
He did. I'm also very creeped out by the fact that she was 17 through most of this show.
Only the first 30 minutes.
And he was much older.
But also, like, does that make her a truant that was living at this commune? Like, she's 17 years old.
Yeah, I don't know what the laws are in the UK, but I would have thought that her father, with all of his money, would have been able to put the force of law and get her out of there.
Oh, 100%. But then you also had Trixie and Raymond, and you had that sort of recurring thing of Trixie getting these weird letters that we couldn't see.
Mm-hmm.
And then finding out that she has actually been having an affair with this man Raymond, whose wife is some kind of abusive monster. I don't.
Arnold Schwarzenegger would cower in her presence.
No. But, you know, they actually seem to care about each other, which I thought was kind of an interesting little love story.
I didn't like the fact that Tom waited for them to kind of reach or get close to climaxing before he decided to barge in.
Well, what about Troy's face when he comes out to the car and he's like, I think they're doing it. He's like, he's so excited. Like he's...
Y'all know Troy is 13 years old. Come on.
And then you had the sort of May and Arno, which I couldn't quite tell was like Arno loved May. I couldn't tell what May felt about Arno. It was very kind of sweet and subdued. But then they kind of spoiled it where like that scene where they admit they have to grow up because they're going to be taking over. And then May asks Arno, did you kill him? He's like, no, of course not. Did you? She's like, how dare you?
He is obviously very smitten with her. And I can't tell if she loves him or just views him as a friend and colleague.
He clearly loves her for all the stuff that terrifies everyone else.
Yes.
Maybe he regressed and found out he was the mushroom. We had some interesting detective work this week. We mentioned a little bit about Barnaby getting annoyed and being sort of losing his signature cool. Also, for he cowered from May. But there was also that bit where the reporter, he technically works out a deal with the reporter that he will give her an exclusive if she backs off the story a little bit. And then he basically just at the end is like, no, I lied to you. And then gives up the Beavers' history as brothel owners for no real reason. It doesn't that's really like they had nothing to do with the murder or anything like that. It's just sensationalist claptrap.
Yeah. You know, you like the Beavers. Despite the acorn coffee, you really end up liking them. They are a couple that is very simpatico with each other. They are really into what they're doing, and they're not harming anybody. It didn't seem like they were harming anybody with the brothel. It seemed like a very progressive brothel.
How do you know? Did you go to this brothel?
There was profit sharing involved. Come on.
Well, it's very Marxist, so it can't be all bad.
Yeah.
We also had some classic Troy bad driving. Classic Troy forgetting to put gas in the car. Classic Troy going to Mrs. Cook's house to ask her questions, but then just eats.
I actually loved that scene. It's one of those times when I do like Troy, because I don't always like Troy.
Yeah.
But I did like him in that scene because he was like, this is like having tea with my gran.
Yeah. I mean, the scene served no real purpose because it only confirmed information we already knew.
Mm-hmm.
It was there just to give Troy a little something to do and some detective work for them to solve the case. But really, we knew they could have done all of that like in a sentence. You know, they could have confirmed all that. But you know, this is only a few episodes from when we first meet Troy, who's kind of a total jerk, and now we see him actually doing some decent police work. He figures out the bag, he finds the will, and we're starting to see him sort of turn around. And I think we're starting to see the evolution of Troy through working with Barnaby.
Yeah. Because you did have the sense in the killings at Badger's Drift that he was on his first week as a detective sergeant. And he is learning. He has become much more observant than he was before.
And he knows how to illegally enter a house. Because he walks in Raymond's house.
Yeah.
And it's like, then he gets Barnaby, who again illegally just entered the guy's house.
Yeah.
They have no warrant. It's just, Barnaby finally doing the Barnaby thing.
And eating their chips or whatever they were eating.
We had some nice, not a lot of consequential home life stuff, but we had some funny home life moments, more references to Joyce's bad cooking.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I do like the fact that they don't seem to, like, Joyce does not seem to understand how terrible a cook she is, because she doesn't quite understand why Tom can recognize that Cully cooked.
Yeah. And that her lumpy gravy.
Oh, God. Cully, the actress at this point, worried about getting a job. That I thought was kind of... I don't know why that was in there. That really did nothing.
Well, it just gives Cully something to do.
Yeah. The whole thing where Joyce took, like, courses at the lodge, and Barnaby's still holding a grudge against...
And she took assertiveness training, which obviously didn't work at all. Because she's never assertive.
No. But I do like the fact that, like, he's just, look at how much these courses were.
Yeah.
Look, that's like something my dad would do. Tom, you're supposed to be better than my dad.
Yeah.
Hi, Mom. My mom listens. I think she does. She'll let me know. And I think I loved that little moment where Tom is talking to Joyce and Cully, and he just cannot fathom how Guy Gamlin would be okay with his wife and child hating him.
Yeah.
Joyce made up, "Oh, you're sweet."
Yeah, she gives that little smile there that's like, that's very Joyce and very Tom.
He's a good man.
Yeah.
I got myself a good man who will abandon me multiple times.
At restaurants,
yeah.
And hates my cooking.
And then, last but not least, Tom pulled the ultimate sin, and he did dad jokes at defenseless servers at a restaurant.
But she rolled with it. She went right with it.
They have to. They have. It's like holding someone hostage. It's like, I'm going to give you a tip, but you have to laugh at my jokes.
I don't think they have to in the UK, though. I think it's not legally required.
No. Well, she might also know that he's a policeman.
Yeah, that is
true. She might know she's a policeman. All right, final thoughts for Death in Disguise.
I do like it. I think there's some things that are obvious, but I don't know if it's obvious just because of other things. I think the acting is very strong in it. I think that it's very well cast. I think there's some very strong actors in it. And I just like overall the feel to it. I think there is a bit of an old-fashioned English manor trope with it, but with the new age commune living there rather than, a family, which is always a nice kind of variation on that.
As I said, I think the episode starts a little slow. It's the static nature of the lodge does not help it. Also, I think by the fact that it's not clear what they're even doing with Bill Carter, like murder, not murder, it becomes this weird sort of non-point for a large portion of the episode, whereas opposed to sort of, no, this is clearly a murder, and we're going to solve it.
Okay.
But that said, once the Ian murder happens, the episode does really kick in, and it does start moving at a nice clip. We get a lot of interesting character moments. We get a lot of good detective work. You get a satisfying ending. Overall, I think it's a solid episode, really enjoyable. I would give it an A.
Yeah. No, I have a few qualms, but yeah, I do enjoy it. I think most of the first season is pretty strong.
Yeah, 100%. Well, that's everything we wanted to talk about. We want to thank you all for listening to us. If you have anything you want to discuss about Death in Disguise or Midsomer murders in general, feel free to email us at welcometomidsomer@gmail.com. If you want us to use the email in the show, say so in your email. We're also Welcome to Midsomer on Facebook and Instagram. If you liked what you heard, please consider subscribing to us or rating and reviewing us on iTunes. That really helps people find us. Also, please tell all your friends about us. Please. Pretty please. We will be back next month, so we hope you will join us again. And as we take the road out of Midsomer, we want to thank you for listening and remind you that in Midsomer, scammy New Age cults can be murder.
And usually are.
Welcome to Midsomer is produced by Eric Buscher and Eileen Becker. All clips in this podcast are used in compliance with the U.S. Copyrights Act Nefarious Exception for criticism and commentary. Our logo and podcast art was designed by Smeedrai. Our theme music is by the infamous Space. Spoiler warning, we will be discussing the events of this episode, including the identity of the murderer. So if you haven't watched it yet and don't want to know who done it, pause this and go watch it. We'll still be here when you get back.